Hello, everybody. So today I thought I would talk about the fact that Minnesota did inquire about A1 Rashid Hageman. I think it was like 2 days ago, a day or two ago, and he went to the University of Minnesota. And I do have all of his stats here, college and pro. Now, in college, he was able to amass 24 tackles for a loss, 10 sacks. He actually did get an interception. He forced two fumbles and had 57 total tackles and 91. No, he had 57 solo tackles, 91 total tackles. So he was able to flash some greatness at times in Minnesota, even though it wasn't all that consistent. He ended up going second round to the Atlanta Falcons in the 2014 NFL Draft. And in his career there, he was able to amass 40 solo tackles and 61 total tackles in his career. Uh, he had 9 tackles for loss. He was able to get 4 sacks, 12 quarterback hits. He had 1 pass deflection, but no forced fumbles. Now, I'm not entirely sure what inquired necessarily means when you're talking NFL. It might just be a phone call. It might be more. We don't really know. It's kind of a vague term. And he was a highly touted interior defensive lineman in the 2014 draft, and he kind of had a slow start to his career. In 2014, he only had 16 total tackles. He had 1 sack. He had 1 quarterback hit. Didn't look like he didn't really do all that much. And then a domestic violence thing happened and was released shortly after that. But he also had a DWI and still needs to serve that 2 game suspension, although I have read that something along the lines of he technically did serve a 6 game suspension for his domestic violence thing already. So we would just have to be worried about a 2 game suspension in terms of that kind of stuff if he were to come into Minnesota. But he does have talent, and I forget if it was at the owners' meetings, which were rather recently, or back at the combine. He was mentioning how he wanted to get a little bit bigger on the middle of that defensive interior. And Richardson, the one guy that we lost on the defensive interior, he is listed at 6'3", 295 pounds. And back at the combine, when Rashid was going in, he was measured at 6'6", 310 pounds, which is significantly larger than Sheldon Richardson. So he kind of fits that mold of bigger. And if you look at some of the other things, because I thought, well, just for instance, let's compare what he was athletically compared to Sheldon Richardson, just to see, because we did lose Richardson, who's kind of more quick twitch, and we don't really have a guy to replace that kind of twitch in him. And they did run the same exact 40 at 5.02. He benched 2 more reps than Richardson, 32 compared to Richardson's 30, and had a 3.5 inch higher vertical than Sheldon Richardson at 35.5 compared to 32. And he did have a 114-inch broad jump, which was 2 inches worse than Sheldon's at 116, but everything is so similar that it kind of makes you wonder, since he kind of tested off the charts, because once again, you have to keep in mind, Richardson's doing this at about 295. Rashid is doing this at 310 and 6'6". So he's like 3 inches taller and almost 20 pounds heavier, and he's doing very similar things to Sheldon Richardson. And the kind of athlete that he is not questioned. It's mostly the what's in here kind of thing. Like, how does he act? How does he work? How does, the guy himself, not so much the football, but the guy himself. And he was mainly a run defender in Atlanta, though I will say that. And even though the numbers would say maybe he could rush the passer more, and I do think he has similar, if not better, explosion, or could have similar explosion that Richardson brought based on the numbers and the athletics and all the good stuff, all the measurable stuff. He should be very similar to Sheldon in those kind of things. And if he were to be brought in for probably, I would assume the veteran minimum, nothing guaranteed. And I do think we need to keep in mind that he's been out of football for 2 years now. And some of these numbers might be a little off at this point. We don't know if some of these have gotten worse, some have gotten better, if he's gotten, he's slimmed down a little bit, but we don't really know all of those things. But I do think this wouldn't, outside of the morality question of do you bring a guy in with domestic violence, which I think Minnesota has proven over the past few years, they really believe in this support system that they have here and are willing to take a chance on some of these guys if they are proven to be worth it. And given the athletic measurements, I can see why they would think that he could be worth it. And it's just mostly, I think what you would be looking at is a veteran minimum contract, though, to bring him into training camp, preseason kind of thing. No guarantees he even makes the roster. And I don't think he would stop you from drafting a guy in the second, third, fourth round to this defensive interior group of, Linval, Jaleel, Jalen Holmes, all those kind of guys. So I don't think that would affect you from drafting one of them in, the first 4 rounds. But I do think he could be a potential low risk, high reward kind of guy. And if you think you can strike gold on him, I see no reason to not give him a veteran minimum contract and just see if he can prove his worth and see if he was worth that draft slot, if he can become what he was supposed to become when he was originally drafted. And I do think if, once again, with our coaches, they have proven they can coach these raw talent guys. And he fits the bill on that. It's just, can he turn his life around? Is he a changed man? Can he do all of those things? And I know there are some people who are turned off right when they hear domestic violence issues and 2-game suspension possibly coming up. Just count me out. I know that. I get that. But I think from a pure player perspective, I think there is a reason to be interested in him. If you are Minnesota, kind of bring him back into his homeland there. And because the second he left Minnesota, he started getting in trouble. So maybe bring him back home. Maybe things work out a little better. You don't know. Things happen all the time. So I would like to know your comments down below. And until next time, I bid you all adieu.